We'll have the Indiana Fever winning, and here alleviating some of the pressure from Caitlin Clark is going to be huge for this Fever team.
Following a post-game review, the league upgrading the initial no call to a flagrant 2, suspending Thomas for 1 game.
Flagrant 2, handing Thomas a 1-game suspension. Every premier superstar needs an enforcer to hold down the paint and handle the chaos. For Caitlin Clark, that trusted enforcer is Sophie Cunningham. On June 22nd, the whole league witnessed 6 technical fouls, 2 early ejections. Maisha Hines Allen got tossed for checking Alyssa Thomas. On Monday, her Indiana Fever battled the Phoenix Mercury in a highly physical, fast-paced matchup featuring 6 total technical fouls, including 1 on Clark and a heated ejection. Their high-stakes rematch on Wednesday delivered this exact flashpoint. 10 seconds after locking down Clark, Cunningham was squaring up with Dana Bonner. Clark herself got slapped with a technical for clapping, and buried deep under the drama was a historic WNBA milestone nobody even noticed. "It is ridiculous," Clark barked afterward, and honestly, she had a point. This is just the latest chapter in a brewing rivalry. Let us break down exactly how it went down. The technical that triggered total chaos. This bad blood did not appear overnight. Phoenix generated heavy momentum early against Indiana, at one point carving out a commanding 16-point lead. The Fever had to spend 3 quarters clawing back into a contest that originally looked completely out of reach. But Indiana established their half-court spacing and began fighting back as Harris drains a crucial 3-pointer. That is a massive spark for Stephanie White and the Fever. With Harris rolling, Indiana outpaced Phoenix 30-11 in the 3rd quarter alone. That dominant run completely flipped the game's momentum, setting the stage for a wild 4th. When that final 10-minute frame began, both benches were absolutely boiling. Clark and Mercury forward Dana Bonner, a former Indiana Fever teammate who departed the franchise under what analysts at the time labeled as highly controversial, engaged in a physical battle for spacing that erupted into a shouting match. Officials hit Clark with a cheap technical foul, logged on the official stat sheet for clapping and instigating. That was the initial baseline call, and then we saw a technical whistle slapped on Caitlin Clark. Yes, that marks the 5th technical foul of her campaign. Why does a sarcastic clap trigger the same penalty as a hard shove or verbal abuse? The official rulebook makes no distinction between them once a ref decides a physical gesture was meant to instigate. On this night, that whistle blew against Clark, regardless of the minor gesture that triggered the call. Clark refused to let it slide quietly. Speaking to media members postgame, she did not pull any punches. She said it is ridiculous to get a technical for clapping. Yeah, it is ridiculous to get rung up for clapping. So if we should all just look at the calendar now and circle which matchup I will be suspended for if these calls keep coming, for simple clapping. She went even further, arguing the harsh call actively hurt her team instead of helping. She insisted if any technical foul gets rescinded, it has to be that specific one. She said she does not understand the decision at all. The Bonner clash did not occur in a vacuum. Earlier in that chaotic 4th quarter, Fever forward Maisha Hines Allen and Mercury star Alyssa Thomas had already traded heavy shoves, with each picking up a technical foul. Is it even possible for a single 10-minute frame to hold this many separate physical flashpoints without a single one of them defining the entire night? By the time Clark got whistled for clapping, the final frame was less about the 11-point gap separating the 2 squads and more about how many physical altercations both benches could instigate before the final buzzer sounded. None of the key players involved in these opening skirmishes had thrown a punch or committed a blatant flagrant, but when a defender lands under a shooter's foot, even slightly, league rules trigger an automatic flagrant one. Exactly. What they actually did was refuse to let a single piece of contact or trash talk go unanswered. That physical pattern has been building between these 2 bitter rivals for much longer than just a single quarter, and the rest of this game would only make that rivalry more obvious. No refs on the floor explained their logic beyond the official label written in the book. Technical fouls rarely come with any immediate explanation. A referee blows the whistle, signals the tech, and the broadcast must figure out the rest from court context and slow-motion replays. On this specific clap, the call was easy to read. Clark had been talking trash with Bonner seconds earlier, and the officiating crew treated both incidents as linked rather than isolated. tying her physical gesture directly to the heated words that came first. The Bonner storyline adds its own massive layer to this beef. Bonner had spent a chunk of last season on the Fever roster before signing with Phoenix under tense circumstances that both sides still view very differently. This physical battle for court position between former teammates who once sharing a locker room changes the dynamic completely. And this home broadcast milked that history, cutting back to them the second the ball went live. 10 seconds that flipped the momentum completely. The action escalated so fast the TV crew missed the angles. Sophie Cunningham, always legendary for stepping directly into the line of fire instead of backing down, went toe-to-toe with Bonner. The ref stepped in and hit both with technicals. Double techs because they're fighting for position in the paint. Oh man, they're still jawing. It's Cunningham and Bonner. Keep in mind, this quarter's technical count just skyrocketed. 4 players, and the fourth quarter wasn't even close to finished. Under 10 seconds later, the pressure cooker blew its lid. Hines Allen, still red hot from her clash with Thomas, shoved her. The contact was unmistakable. The referees didn't blink a second. Technical foul meant an automatic ejection under WNBA rules. Why does a shove trigger an ejection, but clapping only gets a tech? The league's draws is direct physical contact against an opponent, regardless of the overall game situation. And Hines Allen's push crossed that line like nothing else had this quarter. Thomas did not retaliate. She walked away from the contact instead of escalating, knowing that a physical response in kind would likely have ended her night too. Hines Allen hit the showers after just 14 minutes off the bench, recording 3 points, 1 board, and 1 assist. Her 15th three-pointer of this season, a quiet stat line for a moment that ended up defining the entire fourth quarter narrative. All those technicals and ejections boiled down to one quick physical shove that took under 10 seconds to play out. All of this unfolded while Indiana was desperately trying to secure the win. Out. Did any single one of these physical flashpoints explain the absolute chaos this game's broadcast became? Almost. Certainly not. Stacked together in one 10-minute stretch, they completely eclipsed the final score and dominated sports talk for days. Looking back, what makes this wild sequence so notable is what it revealed about how this Fever roster protected Caitlin Clark specifically. Hines Allen did not shove Thomas over a play that touched her. That push landed in the middle of a massive pressure cooker around Clark's battle with Bonner. She took an ejection to protect her teammate on a dispute dating back to a possession before Hines Allen even checked in. That response isn't random. On a squad, it requires a deep, shared locker room, understanding of exactly what will and will not be tolerated on the court. That shove cost Indiana her production for the rest of the night. 3 points, 1 board, 1 assist in 14 minutes was her line before she got tossed. A team trying to protect a lead in crunch time doesn't want to lose a rotation player to an avoidable ejection. Whistle blows on Hines Allen, followed quickly by the second technical. That's an automatic ejection with the 2 technicals. But Indiana absorbed that cost anyway without hesitation. Anyway, with absolutely zero hesitation from anyone on the bench in that exact physical moment. The broadcast cameras told the story of this physical battle. In the moments after Cunningham's exchange with Bonner, the TV crew stayed locked on the jawing instead of cutting to a wide shot. And that shot of Cunningham pointing directly at Bonner as they jawed would go on to go completely viral across social media, detached from the game and taking on a life of its own, focusing on the gesture instead of the play. Clark's masterclass was overlooked. Buried under all those technicals was one of the loudest statistical nights of Clark's season. We must now pull it out of the wreckage. She dropped 24 points and 9 clean dimes, both game highs, shooting 8 of 17, from the floor in 29 minutes. 3 boards rounded out a stat line that would have dominated the post-game headlines. The real headline beyond the box score is the historic streak. With this masterclass, Clark extended her consecutive game run with 20 points and 5 dimes to 6. At the Olympic break, she averages 17 and 8, the longest streak in WNBA history. Does a record like that lose shine because it happened in a game remembered only for technicals, whistles? If anything, the exact opposite is true. Clark broke the record while drawing a tech, absorbing a highly physical, hostile fourth quarter on the floor, while watching a teammate get ejected in her defense, conditions that would disrupt any player's spacing and rhythm. Her raw post-game comments made it clear she did not separate the milestone from the pure frustration. She wasn't just speaking from the losing column after a tight matchup, deflecting blame for a hard defeat. Indiana had won this tough battle. Clark set that historic league record in the very quarter she picked up her 5th technical foul of the season, and she chose to spend her entire post-game presser tearing into the officiating rather than celebrating the milestone. Why would a player use her golden moment at the podium after a big win and a historic record to focus on one single bad whistle instead? Because for Clark, that is clearly a bad whistle that got called. The massive question is, will they call it? Because to her, those two were not separate stories on the hardwood. That technical was, in her own framing, part of an ongoing trend she had been tracking across the entire season. Not some isolated bad whistle she was ever willing to let go, without speaking up. That count of 5 carries serious weight, separate from whether any single whistle on the floor was fair. The league suspends players automatically once they hit that strict threshold within a season, and every single technical counts toward that suspension the exact same way, regardless of gravity. A physical shove, arguing with a referee, or a sarcastic clap during a heated shouting match on the court all register identically once logged. That is closer to what Clark's postgame frustration was actually about. Not just wounded pride over one isolated whistle, but a cumulative system that treats a physical shove and a simple clap as functionally the exact same penalty on the stat sheet. None of that changes what the final box score already says about this physical matchup itself. Her record does not carry an asterisk for the drama surrounding it, and absolutely nothing about the technical foul total changes the massive, game-winning impact she had on the floor across 29 physical minutes. And Clark, I think, catches a technical foul here. And she does. This high-stakes situation was not without recent precedent inside the league, which makes the refereeing crew's whistle that night much harder to view as some automatic call. Earlier in the season, Dallas Wings guard Paige Buers had a technical foul rescinded after a broadly similar clapping incident on the hardwood. The league was apparently willing in that instance to separate the gesture from any intent to instigate on the floor. Whether the league applies that same standard evenly from one broadcast to the next is a separate question from whether any single controversial whistle taken alone was defensible. Does one rescinded technical elsewhere in the regular season obligate the league front office to explain why this whistle stood? Not by rule, but it invites the comparison regardless, and the league office had not publicly addressed the issue by the time this game ended. The massive comeback everyone forgot. Clark's record-setting night happened inside a broader, gritty team performance that deserves its own full accounting, completely separate from the technical fouls that dominated the live broadcast. Monique Billings finished with 14 big points and 10 strong rebounds, her first double-double of this grinding season. Monique, another massive double-double for your squad and for you. It was a quiet, physical, gritty contribution on a night when almost all of the media attention went elsewhere. And it came at a very crucial point in the Claste season when Indiana needed exactly that brand of physical production in the paint from its front court. Billings had not recorded a double-double at any prior point this season before that chaotic night, making her perfect timing worth noting on its own. A strong front court performance like that, arriving in a matchup this chaotic on court, tends to disappear from the game recap entirely, unless someone goes back through the final box score specifically searching for those hustle stats, which is exactly what happened across most of the coverage that followed this intense matchup. The story that traveled was the wild fourth quarter, but the story that decided the game, in large part on the glass, was a 10-rebound night from a rotation player, who has not always been the first name mentioned in Indiana's West rotation. Not every Fever starter had a strong night on the offensive end. Boston finished with 8 points on 2 of 9 shooting, a rough outing by her standards. Boston galloping in transition with an 8-point lead, absorbing heavy minutes and defensive assignments without the offensive bucket production that usually accompanies her physical floor time. Is a role player's off night more or less notable inside an intense matchup defined by technical fouls rather than sharp execution? Less in the moment, but it is part of an honest account of how that 16-point comeback actually happened on the hardwood. And Boston's quiet night is as much a part of that record as Billings' massive double-double. The overall comeback itself deserves serious attention, independent of that fourth-quarter chaos. Trailing by 16 points at one stage, Indiana used an intense 30-11 third quarter to erase the deficit entirely and take full control of the game before those technical fouls started accumulating on the stat sheet. That means the outcome of this matchup was decided on the hardwood before those late-game skirmishes hijacked the entire narrative. Would this matchup be remembered differently if that final frame had stayed clean? We would still get the exact same comeback, the same final score, and a much shorter post-game recap. That chaotic fourth-quarter sequence completely shifted the narrative around this battle, not the outcome on court. On the Phoenix side, Alyssa Thomas turned in a highly productive night in a losing effort, racking up 19 points, 5 rebounds, and 9 assists, facilitating their entire offense. Along the way, she became the fastest player in WNBA history to reach 500 career dimes with a single franchise. Watch Thomas drive and float a left-hand push shot that rattles home. It was her big chance tonight to get to 3 games over 500, surpassing the blistering pace Clark herself had set in 4 fewer games. Kay Copper added 20 points for the Mercury. Yet neither of Phoenix's best individual efforts was enough to overcome that dominant deficit Indiana had built during their dominant third-quarter run, and neither drew anywhere near the massive media attention those late fourth-quarter technical fouls grabbed once the broadcast moved on from the final box score. That historic milestone is worth weighing on its own terms, rather than just folding it entirely into the heated confrontation that followed on court. It remains a genuine marker of a highly productive career achieved through an elite playmaker passing rate sustained across hundreds of physical games, rather than anything specific to this one single night. None of it was connected to that technical foul Thomas picked up later in the very same physical quarter, and the broadcast's near total silence on that historic milestone, once the fourth quarter began, says much more about what modern hoop audiences respond to than about which court achievement actually carried more weight on court that night. The full box score makes it clear how tight this basketball game actually was before the fourth quarter turned it into a completely different story. Just opportunistic play by Indiana in transition to find Cunningham for that deep corner 3. A highly crucial bucket for the Fever. Indiana's 86 points against Phoenix's 77 represents a crucial 9-point final margin, built almost entirely inside one dominant, high-octane third quarter sandwiched between 2 much closer periods. If you strip away those heated technical fouls and ejections, what remains is a highly competitive, back-and-forth divisional matchup that Indiana completely controlled for roughly 10 minutes, holding on tight all the way to the final horn. That is a considerably less dramatic story than the viral one that actually traveled. When everything exploded, Indiana improved to 10 wins and 7 losses with this big victory, going 7-3 at home, snapping a 2-game skid that had Phoenix fell to 5 wins and 13 tough losses, but they managed to end the streak for Kelsey Plum with Phoenix. Meanwhile, Atlanta was picking up their 19th win on the season, handing them their 5th defeat in 6 games. Neither record shifted dramatically because of one single game, but the manner of this win, a 16-point comeback capped by a chaotic fourth quarter that nobody controlled, left a much longer impression on both active rosters than the 2 digits in the win and loss columns would suggest on their own. Thomas's physical history with Clark did not begin on June 22nd, and it did not end there. The two have consistently been on opposite ends of highly physical, closely officiated sequences across multiple competitive seasons. And this game added one more heated entry to a physical pattern that had already drawn major attention from passionate fans and analysts well before this matchup. Why does this one player's name keep surfacing in these physical, intense sequences more than any other opponent Clark has ever faced? Because the gritty, highly physical style Thomas plays with, combined with how frequently Indiana and Phoenix lock horns on a nationally televised broadcast schedule, has put the two of them in these high-tension situations much more often than most rival pairings get chance to repeat. Two highly closely watched teams meeting this often with this much media attention already laser-focused on both of their best players was always bound to produce way more explosive flashpoints than a quieter matchup buried deep on a weekday night slate. What this game did establish clearly, and on the record, is exactly how Indiana's tough roster now responds when physical tension builds. around its star point guard. That Hines Allen ejection was not incidental. It was simply the cost of stepping into a fight that had started with someone else. Cunningham's technical foul carried that same clear signal. They do get a technical foul called against on wetting. Well, I really thought Sophie was just as much to blame. Neither whistle reflects impulsive play. Both reflect a roster that has, over a season, built a clear pattern of never letting physical contact or confrontation directed at Clark go unanswered. That tough pattern did not appear overnight, and it is certainly not limited to the two players who drew fouls in this physical matchup. It describes an entire bench's aggressive posture toward how hard physical play against their point guard gets handled once the official's whistle goes silent. None of this physical play resolved anything about how Clark is officiated on the court, and nothing in this game was likely to. The 5 technical fouls still stand on her record regardless of how justified any individual whistle was. That record for consecutive 20.5 assist games still stands strong, completely unaffected by the fourth quarter that surrounded it on court. Both heavy facts remain absolutely true at once on that very same post-game stat line, and neither cancels the other out. No matter which side of this toxic referee debate you land on, the massive rematch was already locked onto the calendar. That meant every high-stakes storyline from June 22nd, the cheap technicals, the momentum swings, the pure bad blood was set. The ejection, Thomas bringing brutal paint physicality, and Clark slamming the refs, it guaranteed an absolute blockbuster. Fans were primed for war before either roster could even catch their breath. But can a single chippy fourth quarter change the game? Players will never admit it directly, but believe me, defensive spacing and physical paint protection always shift after a battle like this. Rotation patterns and half-court traps get completely reloaded, no matter what the coaching staffs try to tell you at the podium. But the real narrative goes way deeper than a simple divisional grudge match. The hard-nosed physical play targeted at Clark has been a constant league-wide flashpoint, debated by teammates, rival head coaches, and talking heads on every single major network. The national media debates this far beyond any single matchup. Just look at the explosive scoring output on these electric nights. We have actually watched full games in the WNBA finish with less total scoring. But what June 22nd injected into this fiery, ongoing debate was not just another tired, league-wide complaint, but cold hard, on-camera proof of exactly how her own teammates are starting to fight back on the hardwood. Not through cheap, empty statements to the media, but through what Hines, Allen, and Cunningham were both ready to risk on the active hardwood when the game was on the line. What went down on June 22nd is simple once you map out the chronological timeline. A massive 16-point comeback. A flurry of technical fouls sparked by intense on-court exchanges, ranging from a hard physical shove to a single sarcastic clap. An ejection that sent a key rotation player straight to the locker room for defending her star. And beneath it all, a historic, record-shattering performance that had absolutely nothing to do with the physical whistles blowing around her. A matchup remembered for a 10-second physical shove, long after fans forget the 29 highly efficient, elite minutes Clark played to secure the team's momentum. 6 technical fouls, 2 ejections. That was the initial physical foul, and then a quick technical was immediately slapped right on issued on Caitlin Clark. Yes, a 10-second physical shove that cost Maisha Hines Allen her entire night for standing up for her point guard. That is the dramatic version everyone remembers. What nobody remembers is that Clark set a WNBA record in that exact same quarter, her 6th straight 20-point, 5-assist game, a legendary milestone that absolutely nobody else in league history has touched. She did not celebrate the historic milestone. She talked about a sarcastic clap instead, because to her, the record and the officiating were never ever separate stories. Indiana locked down the hard-fought win. Clark secured her record. Cunningham once again proved she will always have her point guards back. The league office is secretly greenlighting this physical abuse to protect the old guard.